Whitney on stage, and I, both tried to say building is a verb, and then got into a whole throwdown over it. And the police came, and it was a real no. I'm kidding. Violet's a good friend, but she happened to say during a panel we were both on that building is a verb, and I said, Violet, in fact, I have a presentation next week, and that's the title. And then when I announced it on LinkedIn a couple of days later, she's like, "You weren't kidding." I'm like, "No, I'm not pulling your chain on stage here, but let's do it again." So new and updated, building's a verb, distributing best practices with automation. I'll talk a bit about what all those words mean. I'm going to bore you with my biography slightly. So I started life out as an architect. I was EYP's director of IT for about a decade, moved on to Autodesk. I was on the Revit team. You may remember me from such great hits as Revit 2010.1 through Revit 2017. Then I helped start something called the AEC Generative Design Group as a director of product strategy. And we made something called Project Fractal, which became Project Refinery, which became Generative Design for Revit after I left Autodesk in 2018. Ian Keogh, who invented Dynamo back when, and I are colleagues from Autodesk. We got back in touch after we both left, started talking about what we had been working on with Project Fractal, wanted to keep going with that. And, as happens with every startup, this time do it right. And so we have a cloud service that I'll be talking about a bit. And Matt Campbell, our CTO, is a longtime Revit developer. I lost him from the very first AEC Generative Design project at Autodesk, something called Project Aqaba that I started, to a position at Google. How could you leave me, Matt? He came back a few years later when we founded Hypar, and we brought him on as our CTO. So we're all Autodesk refugees of one kind or another. We've got a great core engineering team. They have a varied background. We typically hire engineers who started life out as architects or MEP engineers or structural engineers. And they come from the firms you see below. 3 of them have passed at WeWork. Big surprise there. Thanks, WeWork, for sponsoring this gathering. Anyway, what is Hypar? So Hypar is a cloud platform for generative design, construction, and systems. And I'll spend some time talking about what all that means. The customers I'm allowed to show you that we have, they stretch from design build to classic GCs, to architects, to manufacturers, etc. We find we get a lot of traction with folks who actually deliver things directly to the field one way or another, and who have a lot of procedures they like to automate. Our customers are all over the world, and I'm still kind of like looking at you, Canada, and would really like to get down into South America and Africa too. But you can see we're starting to get some traction around the Pacific Rim. Anyway, so talking about best practices in AEC, we've been building stuff for a really long time. If you're curious, that's Knapp of Hauer in Scotland, so far the oldest surviving piece of architecture that we know of. We've been computing for a much shorter time, but long enough. And we've been thinking about computers and buildings for a pretty long time, going all the way back to this essay in 1962 around augmenting human intellect. It is not all about bringing buildings and computers together, but the first top of mind example that Doug Engelbart thought of was the architect at work. We are, getting close back to this idea so many years later. Yes, a solid 60 years. During the meantime, there was some work, even back as early as 1970, people were implementing these ideas, a methodology for total hospital design, actual floor plans being generated from a bunch of requirements on the left in that flow chart. As far as I can figure out, Gerald DeLon never got more funding to pursue this project. And of course, as we know, all this kind of like boiling ferment, came together with computers in the, 80s, and we got this. So those of us of a certain age on this call remember the tyranny of the crosshair. But of course, technology moves on.
I'm sorry, but you are making me laugh so hard. I'll do this to keep this lighthearted. Because just to make sure that the audience doesn't just like get drowned out by your baritone voice.
Right.
But oh my God, that thing is. I actually do the same thing. I did a presentation. I take people to the history of things. Yeah. And they always look at me like, "What are you doing?" But then there's this, and everybody was like, "Yay! Now I'm awake again. I love it." L-space, right? L-space.
Yeah, but like wait long enough and everything advances, and then you get the inverse. So I know, I'm sorry, not to make light of a product that I led for like 8 years and that I'm sure most of you work in every day. There's a certain paradigm here, which is still about drafting, which is there's a blank piece of paper, show us your genius, right? And so our genius is still, carried around in the heads of, such, clip art people as these, and we scale them professionally by giving them even more people that we don't pay that much. And in all of these situations, essentially you are the verb here. And so, when Ian and I founded the company in our earliest conversations, we were like, what if you weren't? What if the person working with the computer were more like a guide? What if automation, was your verb? And Andre at the beginning, was talking about, we're an open platform. We're not an open source platform, but we are an open platform, meaning that lots of people can come on here and contribute if they like. This is one example of that. We make these things called functions, what I'll talk about later, which are little pieces of expertise. But Marco Giuliani at one point grabbed a few things out of our library, added his MJ procedural mass and MJ procedural apartments. And I made this video about like adding an apartment unit into a complex, setting up how many I wanted, what's the unit area, and then having automation on Hypar fill in how all of these units would mix into essentially an arbitrary building shell. And here, we've generated 20 different options automatically for different building distributions. And then we just keep, changing those and asking the units to populate as best they can into this. And, this is the kind of loss leading work for a lot of architects that, they'll do because it might lead to actual paying work. There's no particular reason this should take a lot of time. Mostly you're trying to arrive at certain decisions. There's ways to do that without, belaboring, poor Revit, who really is around to make condocs. Naturally, if you have something like that, you want to fill out a structure. So, here we've got respacing all the structural members and redoing the entire structure in a few seconds. Here, we'll go into some of this in more detail. We'll change, spaces from one type to another, and move stuff around, save all those changes. Might have time to do some of this live, show you how all this works. Maybe, we want to try maybe a timber type structure instead. All of a sudden our building is value engineered into a different shape. Hello. And let that go. And what you're seeing here is this is a whole structural system by a building product manufacturer. And what they wanted was a configurator that would let them take an arbitrary building shape and populate it with their floor, panel, and structural beam and column products, and ultimately come up with an embodied carbon and a price that I'm not allowed to show you, but that they will discuss with their customers. But there's all the individual pieces in there. We're pulling out a BOM. Say you don't like this customer's product, other people also make mass timber designs. And this is like a little demo of how, you can bring something like a DXF, a lot of existing buildings, of course, have this stuff, bring it into Hypar, throw some functions into the mix, in this case, on mass timber framing. And the particular business problem that the person who did this was trying to solve is people come and they've got an idea about steel structure. They'd like to compare it to what it would mean if they did this in mass timber instead. And, for obvious reasons, is there cost savings? Is there delivery changes? Blah, 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 blah. Kind of more on the design side, of course, one of the, drag things to do is to take a program and turn it into, an actual plan. We work, because we're an open platform, we work with other companies all the time. We have a partner named Foresight Digital. They have a healthcare planning product. And so I'm sure everybody's seen one of these adjacency matrices before. This is us downloading data from their site, dropping it directly into a workflow in Hypar. And the first thing we're going to do is just lay that whole program out on the infinite field next to it, show all the relationship between the spaces, all the different areas. And here's all comparatively the different types of spaces distributed. And then we're going to get to this point where we actually see fun stuff instead of just this sort of boring, let's look at properties, and open up the workflow, go to here, and then hit the magic button, automatically place the program. So what we just did here was pack the entire program into that theoretically existing or notional building. And of course, as never happens in architecture, the program is larger than the available space. So what this engineer is going to try to do is, well, what if we added 2 more levels to this? Will it all fit then? And save that off. It kicks off the regeneration cycle again, trying to pack all those spaces in, and we almost will make it. So we've got 3 spaces we still have to deal with and decide what to do. But the thing is, obviously these are all on feasibility studies, right? And that's where you don't want to spend a lot of time and money, right? You want to figure out what the general direction of the project is and get going. Once you're, reasonably there, you'd probably like to get to a proposal fast. So here's a time lapse of one of our engineers using our Hypar Space product. It starts out laying out automatic corridors and just open office everywhere. And now he's using what are called overrides to change all the places that he picks into something else: meeting rooms, lounge areas, reception, phone booths. And all of these are a set of practices on how to put a space together. And, it's a relatively small floor plate, but, in under 9 minutes, he's got something that, plausibly you could show a client with, your achieved areas. And is this kind of directionally where you'd want to go? Let's say they say yes. So now you're trying to figure out your ceilings. Should we have open ceilings everywhere? Should we put in a tiled ceiling? Maybe you're trying to get a notion of how that budget will work, what the quantities are going to be like. So here we're going into a ceilings function, and we're just, saying these types of spaces are now going to get tiled ceilings. As soon as we do that, we're starting to deploy the ceilings in the new spaces that we've just specified. The bill of materials is updating on the right. A lot more tiles, a lot more lines in our resulting bill of materials, etc. So we've got that all quantified. All right, so we've got our ceilings in there. Let's say we want to figure out piping the sprinklers in. Don't try this at home, kids. This is not a real sprinkler system. But what we're really trying to prove here is, can we route pipe through a space and at least get the initial sprinkler head into every room. And then we're going to throw a whammy factor at this thing. So here's our office. Give it a few seconds as it calculates out the pipe paths. By default, it's going to use the corridors. There we've piped to every single room. You know, they're real pipes. They have, you know, sizes and all this kind of stuff, and real fittings. And then we're gonna like throw an obstacle at it, right? And engineer is gonna just draw a polygon saying, you know, don't go through here. Something bad is here for you pipes. Save it. It's still trying to reach every single room, but now it can't go through there. So it's going to figure out a whole new route, basically fish hooking around that area until it leaves the obstacle clear. And then we have still a complete system with pipes to every room. All right, you know, we're sprinklered. We've got our ceilings in. Let's do our kitchens. So this is for a different manufacturer. They wanted to do fast estimates on linear kitchens that they provide. And what's you see happening here is someone's just kind of moving the appliances around, and all those cabinets are from their catalog. And we just kind of make up the difference with the filler strips on the end. Those also have limits. You know, different sizes of linear kitchens are possible. And, you know, just for grins, I'm going to switch over to, you know, kind of a live thing right now for a second. Let's bring up somewhere over here. I've got a good one. Yeah. All right. So here's a live workflow in Hypar. And I want to show you that, you know, we just looked at like a video of the kitchen. And here's a whole tower, and it's got like, you know, some cost estimates. Don't worry, this is in yen, so it's not, you know, the building's not made out of gold. And if I go really deep in here, you'll see that I've got a similar kitchen right inside that building, and all that same functionality is still available to me. So I can just grab the appliances and shove them around and save it. And now it's just going to recalculate that kitchen with the new appliance positions and within the demarked area of that we've set up previously. So there you go. So the point of this is that all these things are being developed for different purposes, for different people are developing them. But because there's one data model under here, they can all talk to each other. None of these people who are involved in, none of the companies who are involved in this big model with all these different things in it know really much about each other. But because they're using a shared data model, all their stuff combines. So that's one of the things that my partner and I, you know, saw going on in AEC. Naturally, from Autodesk, we get to visit a lot of customers. And so you see a lot of practices. And what you see a lot of is people doing the same thing that their competitor down the street is doing. Sometimes you see it on the same day. You know, that is in deep contrast to the way software industry works, which of course is keep building on each other's success. And so we wanted to provide a way that different companies could build on each other's success, you know, in kind of the same way that a project works, right? Like when you get your drawings from your structural engineer or your MEP engineer or something, you don't know how they made those drawings, right? You just know what's on there. And that's exactly what's happening here. All these different functions from different sources are contributing something to the model. You have no idea exactly how they're getting there. So IP is protected, but you get the result. Same thing as you get when you get a set of drawings. And going back to our PowerPoint. So we work with building systems. As I said, this is a roof drainage package for one manufacturer. Their business problem was essentially there are many logistics buildings going up in Europe. Every single system that we deliver of this type has to be engineered or it won't work. Not working means the roof fills up like a swimming pool, collapses and kills people, Or if there's some less dramatic failure and the building happens to be in France, they don't get to work there for 2 years, which is kind of a big business impact. So essentially, we downloaded the engineers' brains into Hypar, and they've gone from doing one of these projects in about a day and a half to about an hour and a half. It gets down to a high level of detail. Again, there's a full bill of materials. This entire catalog of parts and pieces came out of Revit. We maintain a link to Revit families. So assuming the target project has the target families that these came from, we will create an entire connected system inside Revit with the same parts and inside the context of a full building. Similarly, here's a data center working with an engineering company. They have a business problem where they receive a Revit model, they receive a cabling design. They have to order all the pre-terminated cable in the data center. Slapping a scale on a blueprint is only so accurate. So if they make mistakes, ordering more cable is not that big a deal, except that cable takes another week to arrive. And now you've got, your local cloud provider who has lots of money and much anger, wondering why their data center is waiting on pieces of cheap cable. So they wanted to get it right the first time. And what you're seeing here is dropping in different cabling plans to reroute the cable through the data center. It's all going to the same destinations, but sometimes if you concentrate all the cable through one route, there's two things that can happen. One, you can overload the tray past regulation. So we check with a cross section of the tray against cable diameter to make sure we're not overloading the tray. And two, they described a phenomenon called Johnny Forklift. And Johnny Forklift can make a too tight a turn and take out one of these cable trays, which is why there's a primary route and a secondary route. And the secondary route shares as little tray as possible with the primary route when Johnny comes marching home with his forklift and takes out one whole cable route. So, like I said, we work with Revit. This is us doing some framing in Hypar and then graphically streaming it down into Revit before you actually instantiate it as real objects. This is sped up by about 2.5 times, but that still means it's very fast. Because in this case, we're not creating Revit objects yet. We're just using the graphics pipeline in Revit to draw stuff in context so you can understand the implications of what you might be about to import before you do. This works through our free add-in in Revit, which also lets you export stuff and import stuff. And for grins and giggles, why don't we do that one live too? Let me bring up, oh, I know I got you here somewhere. Oh, I thought I did. No. All right, hold on. All right, let's open it up. So if you go into Hypar, we'll just do this, right on the screen here. So I've got a bunch of stuff that's set up here, either as templates or workflows I've used before. So I believe this is the same model about to come in. Right. So there we go. Here's that, everybody who's been in Revit knows which building this is. So let's throw in the other one that we all know and deeply love, the commercial building. And I'll explain what's happening. So this file was exported from Revit. So we have a pipeline to translate stuff from Revit into Hypar, from Hypar back into Revit. Drop this bad boy in there, give it a few seconds to process. I'm going to hide this for a second just to be more dramatic about everything. And give it a few, and we should get a commercial building any second now. Zoom always eats up all the processing power. Come on. Oh, I see, it's hidden. Sorry. Let's do that. Okay. So here's our building. Now, what's happened during that import process is we've also done panelization of all those incoming walls, and we've also done the framing inside those walls. So this basically just looks at Revit walls as they come in and does this process, and it's all based on, you know, different settings in here. So right now we're just regenerating all the panels, and that's going to force the framing in the panels to also regenerate because they changed in a process that I'm sure is familiar to everybody on the call. And there we go. And then we've got a new alternative. Right. So moving on. And then it gets into kind of fun stuff. Now, this is the boring part of the video where I'm just sort of maximizing out a footprint to the zoning envelope in Tokyo. But then this fun happens where we drop in a photo and we produce an implied facade around a different building. So you can do artificial intelligence on top of Hypar. We do some machine learning here, which was kind of the root of this. We worked together with the Stanford Research Institute on this one. You know, full disclosure, their first idea is, I know, we'll take the photograph and we'll paste it on the side of the building. And we said, well, that's boring. Why don't we actually make a real facade that you can quantify in 3D? That'll be fun. And so that's what we've done. And Obayashi talked about this one because they kind of paid for the whole project earlier this year in a couple of press releases. So that was a lot of fun. So, you know, what we're essentially talking about with our platform here is you work on kind of documenting some kind of system, practice, whatever. You publish that up, you publish that to Hypar. You combine that with other stuff that other people have published on the platform, and you build essentially an application after that point by dragging and dropping stuff together. And then you can share that workflow with a URL that we generate for you. You know, that's just we can even do that live, you know, so I could share this out to anybody on earth. I can make that public, and I can just copy that URL and, you know, here, in fact, let's go into, I gotta find the interface now. There it is. Here, have fun, knock yourselves out. So this will make you make a user, so that like I'm not totally like clear in my clean in my motivations here if you want to try this out. But anyway, we have a couple things coming. We have a capability to do embedded Hypar. I may be able to cob it up right now, right off that same workflow. Let's see if it happens because it's still in progress. We are always, it seems, perpetually on the verge of releasing multiplayer as we find more and more edge cases, so multiple people can work in the same workflow at the same time. And one of the things we say more and more to people that you can get your BIM for free by kind of creating it in Hypar and downloading it to Revit. Here's the embedded Hypar thing. This is, you'll notice up here, it says LBDT. That is a clever acronym for look, but don't touch. But this lets you essentially view something and not change any settings, but you can actually, you know, check out individual pieces and, you know, see what their properties are and that kind of stuff. So, and this is of course embeddable in a website. So eventually, you know, this will be much more functional than you see here. We're actually working with a company right now who does asset tracking in healthcare, and they're going to embed their models inside their software using Hypar, and then use Hypar for the essential geometric display and tracking. So, you know, how this all works underneath, I kept saying the word functions. Every one of these things, well, let's use this as a simple example. I'm going to restore this to its interface glory. So each of these things is what's called a function. It does something unique contribution to the model. This one just takes those JSON files and turns them into Hypar stuff. This one takes walls and turns them into panels. This takes panels and turns them into framing. And so the whole library is like this, and you kind of can piece together a whole workflow, based on here. Why don't we just do a new one? So let's say, I want to start with a site on Earth. So, and this also speaks to like having an open platform, because you'll see down here, the little Mapbox logo. We use the Mapbox service to bring in context. Let's find a good place on Earth. How about this little site here? That sounds good. And so, we pull in the tiles, we can turn on the buildings, we can turn on the topography. And we know people who are like basically in Revit all day are using Hypar for stuff like this, because we can just export this whole thing as a mesh, and then you can just dump it in your Revit model and off you go. If that's, that's a flow-through mode for Hypar, that's great. Add a function like, let's do envelope by sketch. This is kind of one of my go-tos for demos. So let's, just draw something on the site here, and we'll do a building. Maybe we do a little L-shaped kind of building, yada, yada, yada. And then once we have this, we can kind of be off and running. So first, let's do this. Let's make it a little taller building, maybe like 70 meters. And, now we're going to need some levels in there. And because of the dependencies that go on in these functions, it starts to elevate stuff that's relevant to what I just did. So levels by envelope is right up top. We can throw a facade on there. Let's do, instead of one of these, let's do a different core. Let's do a core by floors, maybe. We'll add that guy in. And, you can see like in just a few seconds, we're missing floors. Let's add some floors. So you just get this little note here that I missed a step. So let's add in our floors by levels. That'll put a floor on every level. And let's just hide the envelopes. We really don't need that anymore, because we got, and, in just a few seconds, we've got something that kind of looks like a building, right? So there's a lot more in the library. You can experiment, try stuff on your own. But this is how we envision the future, that there's a lot of different contributors on the platform. A lot of them are going to end up being building product manufacturers, perhaps GCs, those kind of folks who are going to provide their systems, and they can be combined into unique designs. And that's what functions are. They have inputs. They produce things like structures. Oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. All these functions link together, like I just showed you, like an envelope, can let you put in levels, let you put in floors, let you put in a core, da, 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 da. You can swap them out. There's different ways of making an envelope in that regard. And all this is based on basically a structured data set that I've been talking about off and on through this. And this is something called elements. We really didn't want to make a data standard. We really wanted to use something that existed. We tried two things. We looked at IFC for about 2-3 months. Then we went over to Borough Happold before they open sourced Be Home, and we asked, hey, could we use that? And they said, no, that's our IP. And we said, okay. So we invented this thing called elements. The reason we didn't use IFC is that IFC was basically designed in the era of relational databases, uses that paradigm. We needed something that would be suitable for fast communication on the web. The thing we didn't do was tie it directly to the Hypar platform or make it closed sourced. This is an open source data model that anybody can extend without talking to us. We know people who use it inside Dynamo. We know people who use it inside Grasshopper. It is a little bit of, our gift to the industry of some way to commonly talk about buildings that's fast, light, and doesn't have a giant committee trying to steer it over decades. So feel free to use it in your own Dynamo projects. If that's the way you swing, that's great. Obviously, this is also a long-term play for us, because you make stuff that's compatible using elements. It's compatible using on the Hypar platform in the future. You know, it lets us do things like this, just take Excel spreadsheets and turn them into Hypar functions. What our engineer is doing here is he's kind of set up inputs and output cells in that, and he's going to drop the Excel file right into Hypar, and then it will turn into a function that can talk to other functions on Hypar. So people use this kind of thing. For example, you saw that table go by, the cost data in yen, that was made using this functionality. Obayashi had a spreadsheet that they used to estimate design build projects. We basically dropped it in like this through a UI. We hooked it into the geometry, and then everything kind of worked off the collective areas in that project. We work with Grasshopper if that's the way you swing. So we have a bunch of nodes for Grasshopper like we do for Dynamo that basically decorate the edges and turn all your Rhino stuff into Hypar stuff. We have a very good relationship with the McNeil folks. They let us run a Grasshopper farm. So you can run your Grasshopper scripts with some Hypar decoration on Hypar. And again, it will talk to everything else on the platform. So, you know, what all of this does, and I'll let this example finish where our engineer is basically gonna draw a footprint of a building and wrap it in a Grasshopper created facade. But, you know, there's one other thing that this kind of, you know, structured data language lets you do, and let's just wait for the rainbow to appear, yay. It lets you do things like, you know, describe, I missed one there, like describe a building and get one. So this was a board afternoons project by one of our engineers, taking OpenAI, hooking it into Hypar elements and starting to describe a building and getting the initial outline of one, essentially. This has floors, it has a core, it's got a real facade. And as he keeps, you know, describing more and more of the building, it just creates more and more of the final design here. And we think this is one of the places we're going to be ending up as an industry, not just as a product here, that this kind of structured language and habitual use will gradually, you know, let a firm start designing buildings in its style by these kind of descriptions. I'm going to stop there. Questions, comments, diatribes, concerns? Everybody good? Still awake out there? All right, Simon's awake. Thanks, Simon. No, nothing, no questions, no, how dare you? No.
It looks like Andre's having trouble with his audio. He'll be back in a minute, but I guess could you maybe talk about what does it take, like the, you know, for a firm that doesn't already have sort of like a computational model built up in Grasshopper or Excel or something like that? What's their sort of, you know, on-ramp time to get going?
Depends how like the kind of thing you're trying to do and how particular it is to you. So, for example, if we bring up Hypar again, I'll go back to sharing.
Let me see if this works.
Oh, there you go. So let's say, you know, you're at least satisfied.
Quick question, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
So, you know, let's say you're
that.
just interested in, you know, doing some space planning and you have one of these things. You have a Revit model, you have a DXF, you have a scan, blah, 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 blah. I'll just start with the sample project, right? You know, if you don't feel, very designy yet about which furniture you're using, and you're okay with all the default steel case stuff we threw in here just to try to get the client toward a decision, you can start, this minute. So, for example, I can do, and I did sort of promise to do something live, right? So let's do this. Let's say, instead of an open collaboration space, we wanted this to be a meeting room, right? So again, you can do this right now. You can open up Hypar, immediately and try this by hitting that template and just going through these steps. And so, here's a default meeting room you'll get with steel case furniture in it, the room size, and you'll see just slightly bigger than this one. And that's dictating the furniture loadout. That's what we call a room type. Now, you can make your own room types using Revit, and unfortunately right now, a little bit of C# code. When we work with our regular customers to do the space planning stuff, they actually are doing like if they don't have a C# developer, they'll do all the Revit stuff, and they hand us a couple of files, and we do the half an hour, 45 minutes of work to turn it into something like this, with all the furniture loadouts that they've already described, right? But if you're satisfied with this, then you get to do stuff like, here, let's just turn this off for a second so we can like go and we'll play with the furniture, right? So here's one of the things that's, I sort of implicitly talked about it, but let's like actually show. So here we can just start shoving all the furniture around, and you saw that in the early video, right? With the legs out, blah, blah, blah. We'll make a real mess of this room. Okay, we'll save that. Now, let's say the client was like, I really kind of liked it as an open collaboration space. Can we just, go back to that? So let's bring up our zones again, right? And grab this. All right, open collaboration, no problem. Let's go back to that. Hang on, sorry, it's stuck below my Zoom bar here. Okay, it's open collaboration, great. And then, you have a great meeting, and he's like, God, thank heaven this is back to open collaboration. Let's go ahead. 3 hours later, you get a call. I just talked to a couple of people. Can we would it be a big deal to like go back to that meeting room that had all those changes? And you're like, yeah, that's, we might have to charge you for that, but we'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, you're doing this. You're going in here and you're saying, let's turn that back into a meeting room, like you said. Deciding whether you can charge them a little more for this change. And here's the thing, like, even though that you've changes to a completely different room type, we remember all those changes you made. And if they are re-applicable as you change the model, we will put them back. So essentially, by this changing back into a meeting room, that record of all the human gestures I just made is also restored. To our knowledge, we're the only platform that does this. There could be somebody else out there that we just don't know about, but this has been described by other folks who do the space planning thing as a really hard problem. It wasn't that easy to solve, but we solved it like 3 years ago. So we can preserve the human gestures that happen. And the reason all of this stuff vanished when I changed the room type is all those changes were no longer relevant to that room type. So it didn't touch any of the furniture, right? So there's some deep intelligence under here that you can use, and you can use it today. So it depends on and if you said to me like, well, I only do stadiums and theaters, you might hunt through the library to see. I believe there actually is a stadium generator in here, or there used to be, that somebody put up. We can even check. But it's always worth kind of checking through the library on what might be there. Typically, if you throw a function in that needs another function, it'll tell you, like, can you find something that makes floors for me, or something that makes a facade for me? And then you can start, trying stuff out. But let's see if we can do a stadium. It might still be in here. Yeah, stadium builder. There's a couple of them. And this is kind of the future we envision. Like I need a playing field for the school I'm building, right? What stadium things are out there? Maybe these will be for free. Maybe you rent them per use. It kind of will depend on on the creator, how they want to charge, but if at all, they might be, working for fame. But, let's make a pitch. We'll save that. Let's see what happens. It's been a while since I ran this one. Which, to be clear, we didn't make this one. This appeared on the website, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. And there we go. There's our pitch. We're all set to go. So, there are things you can do today. We'd be interested in is, try it out. We have a Discord server where, many, luminaries and lurkers hang around, and we have a channel saying request a function. And that's really for kind of everybody who's on the Discord server to pick up and maybe do something. And there are a few business relationships that have arisen out of that if we don't already have something in the library. So kind of depends on your use case. Deeper dive, we could talk further. Certainly, decide whether there's something on there or whether you might need something custom. We do a lot of custom work. We're increasingly moving that out to partners. We want to work on the platform. We also help people who started with us with a checkbook and a dream to like build their own team to keep taking the work further. In fact, I think I could show this. Give me a second. But anyway, other questions while I bring, one other example up.
So can you guys hear me still?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, my video and sound kind of went sideways.
I hear you, man.
You guys are relying a lot on library, right? On a well put together library from which you pull elements.
Well, Elements is ours, but it's open source.
So Revit Elements, like Elements in not in a branded fashion, in a generic word, right? You're to pull things, right? All the things that you put into the model, you pull from a library.
Yes, this, like what you just watched me do is adding, from this library, right? So, different structure things are available.
Yeah, but also like studs are coming out of a stud library. Panel types are coming from a paneling manufacturer's library.
Yeah.
Furniture comes from Steelcase, Hayworth, whatever you load, right?
Could be. Yeah, it depends on whether it's on. Like a good example of that last one would be there's a company called Focal Point. They make baffled ceilings. And so, for example, let's go and go back into that workflow I was just in, because that's actually a pretty good one. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, here we got our space planning thing, and, let's give it a shot. Let's open up, add a function, let's say focal point. Let's add that bad boy in down at the bottom of the stack. Hang on, I gotta get my freaking zoom out of the way. Let's set up a ceiling region. Let's say in this area, we wanted a focal point solution. Ta-da, save that out. Give it a few seconds while it calculates. And there we go, right? And again, Focal Point knows nothing about Hypar space planning, right? Like all it does is it knows that there is a perimeter that it fills, and that you can change the baffle spacing on it. You can change the light spacing. You can maybe make a bunch of materials. And it's just using those inputs to fill that polygon with the product.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How flexible is that language thing that you were throwing at the end of your theoretical thing when you were just typing in? Yeah. I
would say not very flexible outside that, narrow area. Like, if we gave it like a steady 2 weeks of attention, it would probably be extremely flexible. But
All
I
right.
mean, if you
Yeah.
typed in, if you
So
typed in,
it still needs an architect to talk architecture. I couldn't turn this over to a barista who describes a coffee shop because they would use all the wrong words, right?
chances are, yes. So,
Okay. I mean,
however,
it looks promising and excellent,
Yeah.
but okay, yeah, okay, you're explorers. I love it.
Yeah,
That's what we're here for.
it's basically like a person learning a language in a lot of ways, right? Like the first couple things you say, please, thank you, and excuse me, and then you gradually work your way up to, I'll have the latte with a double shot. So
Yep.
other questions, comments? Yeah, Matthew, what's up?
Yes, with your clients or your prospective clients,
Yeah.
are you getting sort of resistance because, wow, you can build a building in 5 minutes, so we should only pay you like $1.50? Like, are you getting, in the same way that when everyone was using AutoCAD, Revit came out and you could build a building or you could format a building very, very quickly. Do you find that you're getting resistance?
So I had an interesting conversation at AU with a current customer, and I described a little bit of this, type of problem. I will say this is a very profitable firm. And the person I was meeting with kind of just stared at me for a couple of seconds. And they said, when clients say to us, that didn't take you much time, so I don't want to pay you so much, we say, hey, we're not saving us time, we're saving you time. And that's worth money. So you're still going to pay the same amount. So basically, it's staring somebody in the eye and explaining that you're delivering value, not labor. And a lot of clients do the same thing. Like, a 4-second stock trade is 4 seconds of labor, but make the right one. Are you really going to compensate the guy on 4 seconds of labor? It's just that the architecture profession especially has a problem with that, gimlet eye, green eye shade moment to say, no, you're buying on value. You're not buying labor of my peons.
Have you, well, this is actually a thing that's come up frequently. We had a discussion a couple of years ago with Bill Bernstein, who I presume you're familiar with.
A good friend.
And I figured he's got a class, one of the classes that he does at Yale, or it's just a task, I'm not quite sure anymore, but he's asking his students to come up with a different cost model.
Yeah.
Something other than money for time or percentage of construction cost. Right? Yep. With all of these things on the horizon, where is value and how do we test in on value and not on, time of, butt and care?
Yeah, I can tell you a few years ago, I had a conversation with a large multidisciplinary firm who's a customer, and I talked to their head of interior design, and she said, I have somebody who can sit down with a client for 3 hours and save them $4 million of leasing costs a year, and I get paid $1,000. She's like, this is not a good business model. So of course, we're all, every business, software as well, everybody's looking at how do we all get compensated commensurate with the value we're delivering, right? I know another software developer, friend of mine, large company. They said, we work with a very, very large company, and 100 people in that company knew our name because they were working with us. And then they figured out how to leverage our product. So 125,000 people in the company were suddenly using our product, and I need to figure out how to monetize that. So, you know, there's a big difference, obviously, with somebody, you know, you've got some team that's managing something, and then it's opened up to everybody in the firm. The value goes up exponentially. So now what? Right. I think it's a business equation that everybody is trying to solve one way or another. We saw it, you know, back when, as you were alluding to, Andre, for, you know, service fees. Vela, you know, started billing on the basis of project size, as many users as you want for a flat fee, given the value of the project. You know, that's one way to look at it. You know, they don't have a conflict of interest in that regard, obviously, because, you know, they have no control over it. You know, TestFit, another example, you know, their business model is against how many doors are delivered, basically how many units. And that's a public record because, you know, it's not required to be a public record, but every one of their customers, as a selling point, brags about how many units they built last year. So, you know, it's pretty easy. You said you built this many units. You owe me, you know, X times that. So I don't have a clear answer for you how you do it. I just know, you know, the firms that practice best value what they do.
It's I don't know, maybe it's a panel discussion sometime in the future.
Absolutely.
People.
You know, I was on a panel ago.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, like here in Boston, and a few firms are sitting around the table, and one of them said, you know, I tell the clients, do not come to me for construction documents. I am the most expensive way to buy construction documents. I deliver a good hospital. Talk to your contractor about producing the construction documents. I do design, right? And then somebody down the table looks at this guy and goes, if I don't do construction documents, how am I going to make any money? And I was like, your firm is going to be owned by the first firm soon. So that's, you know, it's taking a stance and making it stick because you actually are really delivering value. I know it's not easy. It's not easy for anybody, but.
Yeah, that's like half of the tail end of discussion is usually exactly this. I listen to people and then I come up with, oh, I'm going to turn it to the next event. All right. What else do we have out there, folks? Question. Simon is asking, can you create Star Wars theme using Hypar?
Did I hear Star Wars? Star Wars.
Yeah, just type in, you know, in a galaxy far, far away. A long time ago.
Dude, I wish. I'm just going to have to name an internal project, Star Wars. I want Star Wars created with a galaxy far, far away, guys. Go.
Yep.
No, you can't, unfortunately.
That still sounds like a fun Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Winter's coming.
Anyway, if you know, those of you who dive into Hypar.io and, you know, make the free account and play around, will find that, you know, gee, this is kind of a head scratcher. We know. One of our big projects now is to make all the capability much more easily accessible and understandable by folks. So it's still a little bit of a geek fest. It's one of the reasons we're also doing embedded Hypar, so it can be less of a geek fest for people that want to embed it. But if anybody does, you know, mess around with Hypar, you know, and you have suggestions, anything, I'm happy to, you know, send Andre a, you know, forever link to our Discord server. Feel free to, you know, bury a discussion in all your suggestions. I'll send out some contact information, etc., and you can distribute. You know, love to hear like how we can make this better.
Yeah, folks will be putting that into the comments in the meetup. Sometime over the next week or so, we'll post a video of this in the meetup, the video link, and then whatever Anthony wants to publish, we'll dump it in there. I'm keeping my video off. Evidently, it's been listening. And Matthew's got his hand physically raised, old school, 1982. Go Matthew.
Okay, the other question I had was,
Yeah.
you talked about things like 3 years ago, you were at a point and then now you're at a different point. Where do you see yourself 3 years from now? Or like, where do you see the progression of not necessarily the company, but the techniques or just like there was a time when there was no Revit and then Revit is everything. Now there's other things, as you're alluding to, you're the new thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, predictions are hard, especially about the future. But where we see our customers pulling us is we either have some kind of aggregator, a design builder, a contractor who says, I have procedures that will work on this platform. Then they think, I have suppliers that I really wish would use this platform, so I didn't have to figure out what their procedures were. They would just tell me and I would include their systems. And then we talk to the suppliers and they say, you know what, I have other customers and I wish they use this kind of system, because then this thing that I did for this one, they work for all these other companies. And so we see, for folks who have to physically deliver stuff in the field, to them, these kind of decisions are a cost center, not a profit center. So what we see is that there's going to be more and more of a web work of this stuff happening around to these companies that already have relationships. And I had an interesting meeting at AU when, one company and another company were talking about how they exchange information, and a third company was like, you guys do that all the time? And they weren't in that cozy club, so they started to think, you know what I'm saying? So what we think is going to happen is there's going to be more and more, like happens in the industry. It's all based on relationships. It's going to be more and more of these relationships that are also mediated across our platform, right? There's going to be a point where it makes sense for the design community that is interested in a different type of business model than labor for money, and delivering value for money also comes on, or they're going to be asked, could you take that Revit model you guys are working on and just please put it on Hypar, because then we're going to turn it into a construction model, right? So we're kind of coming at this from a different direction. We honestly kind of started with architects and engineers because they're our people, and found that a lot of folks couldn't get their head around, like, I have a fee, but if I use less labor, then I'll have to charge less, not thinking if I use less labor, I make more money. Regardless, all the GCs, design builders, and building product manufacturers saw it right away. Like, I'm spending a lot of time trying to geometrically make decisions, and I really wish something would do it for me. There's some stuff I'm really not allowed to show you where we have a GC who basically had a person who's been doing something for 30 years, is really good at it, can't be on every project, and is going to retire. And they basically said, can you take what's in this guy's brain and just put it into a piece of software that we can keep after we hand him a gold watch, right? Because they have a way of doing something, they have a way of managing their materials, and they want their younger project managers to like have a safety net that the software tells them, like, this is probably a good way to do it, and they can still intervene and say, not this time, So we think it's really going to come more from the folks who have processes that they absolutely like have to repeat if they're going to make money, see the opportunity for automation, and then certain bits of the design community will kind of come on board. People who are doing stuff like the latest Walmart adaptation into an urban environment, right? Guaranteed a good thing for automation. You're building a $40 million Beverly Hills mansion, it's a one-off, and the owner is paying for that human touch. They don't want a cookie cutter house. They want a unique artistic statement. Probably not an automation opportunity, maybe until you get to the construction part. So it kind of depends on what your work is. I mean, we get a lot of interest from designers on healthcare, right? Because it's like such a pain to keep a track of all that FF&E and make sure it's in every single room correctly. Well, automation can take care of that, right? It's one list. All the devices go where they're supposed to go. you're done, right? So humans like picking off little piece of equipment and going, like we have an engineering customer who refers it to the, death by 400 clicks, click, 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 click. Really? So, I mean, it's one of the reasons on the platform that we have this kind of concept of room types, like with the meeting room or the open office or whatever, because like something like Revit doesn't really have a concept of a room type. It has a concept of a boundary, and you can call it a room if you like, it's great, but it doesn't really, have intelligence to it, right? And, when you're doing 400 patient rooms, you're kind of hoping for a little repetitive intelligence. So I was talking to someone, an architecture firm we're proposing to right now at AU, and I was saying, the era of this sort of general purpose platform on which you can do anything, like an AutoCAD, like a Revit, we kind of feel like those things will always be around. They have to be, but there's a lot of value to be gained in something that's much more sector specific. If I'm, HKS, I build a shitload of stadiums, right? And it's no surprise that they have always kind of been pioneers out on the edge of automating that stuff, because they're doing it all the time. And it's got so many rules attached to it. Do they really want somebody going, see, I mean, it's crazy. So, and they knew it was crazy. And so they did all this stuff on all kinds of different platforms over the years to make sure that it didn't feel crazy anymore. So I think that's coming for other sectors. I think there's some things that it's never going to be suitable for. So.
Can you, you showed some examples of, going from the barest sort of site plan and developing the whole thing the whole way to doing framing plans and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, and so clearly you can do sort of like soup to nuts, more or less, maybe not, you can't do the condocs in it, but you can, do a lot of development in there. Can you talk a little bit about how, what the opportunities are for someone to say like, okay, we've already gone through our entire DDs in Revit. We've got that all done. Yeah. And we have one problem that this would be a perfect thing for. We're going to do it for a month, and then we're going to take it back out, and it's going to live in Revit for the next year after that, and we're not going to touch Hypar again.
Yeah, no, that's totally a kind of workflow we support. That data cabling thing, like all those cables drop back into Revit. Like that whole data center has been in development for, by the time they see it, for months, right? And they're adding in one new problem. How, like, we got to buy the cable, right? And the cable's got to get back in the Revit model, because that's what the client wants to see. Wants to actually see a full 3D. There's all my cables. That's exactly the problem you described, right? It's been under development for months. We've got one extra problem. It would be great to automate. We bring in the essentials from the model. You don't have to take in everything. And then solve the problem, take the added stuff and throw it back into the Revit model, dust your hands, off you go, build it. By the way, little shout out to, I'm going to get this wrong. I think Helen's over at Canon now, but little shout out to the last time, the last live AU before the pandemic, when Helen saw what we were doing, and she says, "You guys got to do existing buildings. So much of our work is existing buildings," and so we did a lot of stuff with existing buildings. So. Other stuff? I know it's getting late.
Yep, we're hitting 7:30. We've been on at it for an hour. This is exactly what we usually do. Matthew's giving you a thumbs up.
Great.
I'll do some closing words without video. Yeah, Anthony, thank you so much. This is exactly what this group is about.
Great.
I hope we'll run another one if we ever get Phil Bernstein to talk about what his students' ideas of like how do we get paid. I'll throw you as a second panelist in. the two come from the practicality side, and we'll see where that goes. I do think, like looking at the images that you were pulling over, I do think you're in Boston, right? You do
yes.
need to meet Onur.
I'm in the
You do
Boston.
need to meet Onur. He's a trained architect, a perpetual learner, who's gone from designing buildings for KTS to designing tools to playing with AI and how to create imagery from AI. I think the two of you would be very, very suitable for a glass of beer.
Great.
If I ever come up to Boston, I'll definitely hook both of you up.
Oh, totally.
Please feel free to join us December 8th. Everybody else, December 8th. In case I haven't said that yet, December 8th. Other than that, thank you so much. This was absolutely terrific. And we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thanks a
All
lot,
right, thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Very nice to meet y'all. Bye-bye.